Refueling. For years, this cornerstone of Starship architecture has driven intense debate. Launching multiple tanker flights to refill a single ship in orbit struck many as overly complex, even impractical. How many launches would it take? Could orbital propellant transfer truly scale for deep space missions? At SpaceX, however, complexity is not an obstacle, it's a design variable. Musk recently outlined a significant upgrade planned for Starship V4, targeted changes aimed squarely at relieving the refueling bottleneck. So, how will Starship evolve? What defines version 4? And could these upgrades sharply reduce the number of tanker launches per mission? Let's break it down in today's episode of Great SpaceX. SpaceX has not yet fully entered the V3 era. V3 prototypes remain in testing, with a first flight expected around mid to late March. Yet even before V3 debuts, version 4 has steadily taken shape since late last year. Early indicators point to a potential 2027 introduction, a total stack height between roughly 142 to 150 meters, and payload capability exceeding 200 tons to orbit. But the defining change is not just scale. It's refueling. Starship's architecture is built around orbital propellant transfer using two variants. The primary ship, sometimes called the target, whether crewed, cargo, or configured as NASA's HLS, and the tanker, optimized purely to carry and transfer propellant in orbit. V4 preserves that dual vehicle mode but significantly expands performance margins. Musk recently stated Starship V3 tanker version will deliver over 200 tons of propellant per flight. That figure refers to transferable propellant from the upper stage, not payload mass. In practical terms, each tanker flight could deliver more than 200 tons of usable fuel to a waiting Starship in orbit. To understand the magnitude of that claim, consider prior versions. In V1, ship propellant capacity was roughly 1,200 tons. V2 and V3 introduced only modest dimensional growth, keeping total capacity within a similar range. Tank volume, and therefore transfer potential, remained fundamentally constrained. Version 4 changes the equation. Current projections suggest Super Heavy could stretch to approximately 81 meters, with the ship expanding to around 61 meters. That scaling increase directly translates into larger tanks. Estimates indicate Super Heavy may carry about 4,050 tons of propellant, while the ship could hold roughly 2,300 tons. By comparison, earlier Super Heavy boosters carried approximately 3,200 to 3,600 tons, and ships held around 1,200 to 1,600 tons. V4 represents a step change in stored energy. For the booster, that additional propellant increases thrust margin and ascent performance. For the ship, the benefit is twofold: more efficient orbital insertion and greater transferable propellant in tanker configuration. Of roughly 2,300 tons aboard a V4 ship, about 2,100 tons may be consumed reaching orbit. Approximately 200 tons could remain available for transfer during a dedicated tanker mission. On its face, 200 tons may appear modest relative to total tank capacity. Mission-level math tells a different story. A lunar-bound Starship, including a human landing system configuration, may require roughly 1,200 tons for full refueling. At 200 plus tons per tanker flight, 5 to 6 launches could complete the transfer, consistent with Musk's public comments. That is a meaningful reduction. Under V1 through V3 assumptions, analysts frequently projected more than 10 tanker launches for a comparable mission. Such requirements amplified operational complexity, scheduling pressure, and cumulative risk. With V4, orbital refueling begins to look operationally tractable. The implications for Artemis are direct. If Starship HLS is based on current generation dimensions, V4 tankers could refill it in 5 or 6 flights, lowering logistical barriers to sustained lunar operations. Future baseline V4 ships, designed for deep space missions, may require greater propellant loads. A shorter duration lunar sortie might not demand maximum capacity, whereas a Mars transfer would likely require full tanks and therefore additional tanker launches. Even in that higher demand scenario, efficiency improves markedly relative to earlier architectures. Optimization extends beyond tank size. Prototypes such as Ship 26 has demonstrated the logic of tanker specialization. A dedicated tanker does not require flaps or a heat shield for atmospheric reentry. Removing those systems reduces structural mass and increases propellant fraction, enabling greater transferable volume per launch. Ultimately, cadence becomes decisive. Musk has articulated a long term objective of achieving thousands of launches per year, even suggesting more than 10,000 annually in the distant future. That would imply dozens of launches per day. While aspirational, Starship is the only launch architecture explicitly designed around full reusability, rapid turnaround, and scalable production to approach such rates. If flight cadence, manufacturing throughput, and launch infrastructure scale successfully, Starship could reach tempos unprecedented in orbital history. Near term, however, the impact is more immediate. If V4 enters service on schedule and demonstrates reliable tanker operations, sustained lunar missions become simpler to execute. With 5 to 6 refueling flights required, orbital propellant transfer shifts from being the dominant uncertainty to a repeatable operational procedure. The moon becomes more accessible, deep space missions become programmatically viable, and Mars begins to transition from ambition to phased execution. Are you looking forward to the Starship V4 tanker? If you are, comment V4 tanker below. Like the video and subscribe to follow the next chapter in Starship's evolution. Now, once orbital refueling becomes routine, Starship moves from impressive to transformational. Refueling is not optional for a vehicle of this scale. It's foundational. But once mastered, Starship's true performance envelope opens. In version 3, Starship is expected to deliver around 100 tons to orbit. Version 4 projections approach 200 tons. That shift alone reshapes mission architecture. Instead of assembling infrastructure across numerous constrained launches, entire habitats, power systems, and heavy structural elements can fly in a single mission. The crewed variant expands the impact further. SpaceX has outlined ambitions of transporting dozens of astronauts per flight, potentially up to 100 in long-term concepts. Current crew vehicles carry only a handful. That scale changes the objective from short-duration missions to sustained presence. Large payload margins accelerate the build-out of lunar and Martian infrastructure. Mass-intensive systems, environmental control, surface mobility, excavation equipment, power grids no longer need to be fragmented into small components. Timelines compress, logistics simplify. Elon Musk has suggested a lunar city could emerge within roughly 10 years once transportation scales. Mars settlement, he estimates, could take 20 to 40 years. Ambitious, but far more plausible with fully reusable heavy lift and orbital refueling than with legacy architectures. Starship's philosophy is the differentiator. Full reusability lowers marginal launch cost. High payload capacity reduces total mission count. Orbital refueling extends reach beyond Earth orbit. These factors compound. Starship is not merely a rocket, it is an infrastructure system. It can transport, refuel, service habitat, or function as an orbital platform. Once refueling is routine, the constraint shifts from can we launch it to how fast can we build. That is the moment exploration becomes expansion. And before any of Starship's long-term potential materializes, orbital refueling remains the decisive hurdle. The first hurdle is time. SpaceX is targeting an uncrewed lunar landing demonstration as early as next year, followed by a crewed landing in late 2027 or early 2028. Margin is thin. The first V3 mission has yet to launch, and before refueling can even be attempted, Starship must repeatedly reach orbit, deploy payloads, and survive reentry. These are baseline requirements, and at the current cadence, it's unclear whether all milestones can be achieved on schedule. Program updates indicate the initial refueling demonstration will require at least 2 missions. One long duration flight to validate on orbit propellant retention, followed by a second launch to perform fuel transfer. Additional flights will likely be necessary to refine procedures and establish reliability. The question is direct: can the system mature fast enough? The second barrier is technical. Cryogenic methane and liquid oxygen are difficult to store in space. In microgravity, under solar heating and thermal gradients, boil off becomes a serious risk. Mitigation demands advanced insulation, active thermal control, pressure regulation, and possibly sun shielding. If propellant depots are introduced, long duration stability becomes mission critical. SpaceX has demonstrated internal propellant transfer in earlier tests, an important milestone, but scaling that to tanker to ship transfers of hundreds of tons remains unproven in flight. Rendezvous and docking add complexity. Two 50-meter class vehicles must align with high precision while maintaining attitude stability to prevent slosh and structural stress. Musk has suggested docking 2 starships may be simpler than docking Crew Dragon to the ISS due to shared design compatibility. That may be true, but it hasn't yet been demonstrated. Transfer architecture presents further trade-offs. Pump-fed systems increase mechanical complexity, pressure-fed systems demand precise tank control, settling techniques may require rotation or thrust. Each introduces risk. Then there's scale. If each lunar mission requires 5 or 6 tanker launches, fleet size and production throughput must expand rapidly. Rapid reusability is not optional, it's essential. Manufacturing at Starbase and future facilities must sustain high output. Launch infrastructure is another limiting variable. SpaceX currently operates 2 orbital pads at Starbase and 1 at LC-39A with plans for SLC-37. But high cadence requires more than pad count. Rapid inspection, refurbishment, hardened structures, streamlined fueling, and efficient integration flow. Recovery operations, including tower catches, also affect turnaround time. All of this unfolds as the program transitions into V3. Previous campaigns demonstrated how iterative and difficult progress can be. Even successful flights revealed issues such as heat shield tile loss and material oxidation. This year's objectives: repeatable orbital insertion, reliable payload deployment, controlled re-entry, refueling validation, demand not just success, but consistency. After V3 matures, V4 must still debut, complete testing, and validate its tanker configuration. The Lunar-specific variant developed with NASA remains schedule critical. Any delay in refueling capability directly affects that timeline. The path forward is technically defined but operationally narrow. Time pressure, cryogenic stability, precision docking, transfer reliability, manufacturing scale, launch cadence, variant sequencing. If these variables align,